Hello, here we are again with a brand new episode of the Fun Kids Science Weekly. This is the only show that guarantees to uncover all the secrets inside the universe in around about half an hour. My name's Dan, thank you so much for finding us and listening. This week, we're headed up to space to take a look at one of the hottest stars that we've found. We'll also hear about the first astronauts that have left America for almost 10 years, and we'll chat about a hornet that's coming to destroy Britain's bees. Plus, I'm answering some of your questions, as always. Today, they're about broken bones, they're about camels, and about why the air never runs out. We'll touch on those after we catch up with one of our favourite geniuses on the show. This is Professor Hallux.
Professor Hallux's Digital Dental Depository, with support from Philips Sonicare.
To honour great Uncle Halitosis, dentist extraordinaire, on the occasion of his 100th birthday, Professor Hallux is creating a pop-up digital dental depository, an oral health help desk. He's going to see how many questions all about teeth he can answer against the clock.
Give us a hand, will you, Nanobot? The turbine needs winding. Here you go. You can ask the questions. Today, they're all about the bugs in our mouths.
Bugs in our mouths? What on earth do you mean by bugs?
What I mean by bugs is microorganisms such as bacteria, tiny living things which make a home in all sorts of places on Earth, and that includes mouths. Bacteria collect everywhere in the mouth, and not just on the teeth and gums. They often cover parts of the cheeks and the back of the throat. They can also live in between all the bumps and ridges found on the tongue.
Not keen on that. So, bacteria, horrible germs which make us sick. True or false?
False! Most bacteria are harmless, and many are even helpful to us. Only a small proportion of bacteria make us poorly. There are typically over 70 different types of bacteria in the mouth. Most of them occur naturally, doing you no harm at all. There are, however, some bacteria that can damage our teeth and gums and cause problems like bad breath.
You're doing great! Next up, how do these bugs cause damage?
It's all because of plaque. A plaque attack! If you don't brush your teeth, millions of bacteria can collect in a sticky substance called plaque. That's the yellow coating you sometimes see on your teeth. If you run your tongue around your teeth before you brush your teeth, you might be able to feel it. Some bacteria love to digest the sugar in our mouth. As they eat, they increase in number and produce acids that break down the surface of your teeth. If not removed, plaque can completely destroy the outside of the tooth and expose the nerves inside, and that's toothache. The more plaque you have, the more of these harmful substances are in contact with your teeth and gums.
Oh, better hurry. What's the best way to see off plaque attack and keep the harmful bugs at bay?
Proper brushing, flossing, and using antibacterial mouthwashes can reduce the number of bacteria that build up in specific areas between the teeth and along the gum line. They'll reduce the plaque and help keep your teeth and gums safe and strong.
And finally, for a bonus point, what about tongue brush?
Well, as we've seen, bacteria are all over our mouths. And there's no point just focusing on getting rid of those on our teeth and gums. Using a tongue brush helps remove those lurking in the ridges on your tongue.
That's correct, and time's up. Brilliant, Professor. Very respectable score there. And lots of data for our digital dental depository.
Professor Hallux's Digital Dental Depository, with support from Philips Sonicare. Find out more at funkidslive.com/Hallux.
Right, let's get to some of your questions then. Honestly, this is my favourite part of the show. Mainly because I love figuring out the stuff that you're really interested by. The questions that we get sent over to Apple Podcasts, where you leave a review, by the way, you find the Fun Kids Science Weekly on there. There's a little review box. Type out your question there so I can see it. Let me know your name as well so I can say hello to you. Some of the reviews, some of the questions that we get asked are ridiculously random, and I love them all. I love figuring out what's making you tick. Today, we've got one from Rainbow, who's over in the United States, who's got a bad wrist. they've been told it's a bruised bone. They want to know what that means. How do bruised or broken bones fix themselves as well? Now, bones are mostly made up of tissue. No, not the type of tissue that you snot all over, not covered in bogies. A tissue is a group of cells that do the same thing. Now, when your bone is bruised, some of that tissue is damaged. When it's fractured, all of that tissue is damaged. Now, when it's bruised, you might get blood near the bone, underneath the skin, which makes it look red, but it's there for a very good reason. Now, when a bone is broken, special cells called stem cells are deployed to go over to the broken, fractured, bruised bone, and these stem cells turn into other types of cells. So they kind of become the bone that they need to fix. Then the blood will surround the broken bit of the bone, which protects it, so the stem cells and some bits of the bone marrow can fix the bone. I really have done my best there, Rainbow. It's a massive subject. I've only briefly touched on it. I hope that's good enough for now. I think I'll try and get a proper expert to come and sort you out in a few weeks, though. Also, Megan, who is from Texas. Hey, Megan, thanks for listening to us in Texas. Who asks, how long can camels survive without water? Now, remember, before we crack on with this one, a camel's hump is not filled with water. Very common misunderstanding. It's actually filled with fat. And that fat keeps them going. It gives them energy when they can't find water. I guess, imagine like your mum or dad keeping a spare can of petrol or a little bit of gas in the car that they can use to fill up with, just in case they can't find a gas station to do that. That's kind of what a camel's hump is for. Now, humans can only last about 5 days with no water at all. But during the winter in the Sahara Desert, camels have been known to survive around 6 months with no water. And finally today, for questions, Cole, who is 6 years old, asks, does air ever run out? Not really. That would be kind of bad as it is, if it did. The hope is it never will because of photosynthesis, Cole. Us humans, we breathe in air all around us and we take the oxygen out of that and we use that, we pump it around our body. It's what gives us life. And we breathe out most of the stuff that we don't need. Now, trees do something called photosynthesis. It's where, using their leaves, they take in air, like we do, but they use the carbon dioxide, the stuff that we don't need, and they breathe out the oxygen, which we do need. So it's this lovely continuous cycle. We take in the oxygen, breathe out the carbon dioxide, they breathe in the carbon dioxide, give us the oxygen. So the idea is that, hopefully, if there are so many trees around, there should always be air. Thank you so much for those questions. If you've got something that you need answered on the show, you need to leave it as a review for the Fun Kids Science Weekly over on Apple Podcasts. This week, we're talking about some big old brutal beasts. There is a brand new book out which reveals how one of the most fearsome beasts in the ocean actually could be quite different than you imagined. It's called Shark Superpowers. It's by Jillian Morris and Duncan Brake, and they're on the show to tell us more. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, quickly, I think we need to put our minds at rest. When you think sharks, you think horrendously deadly creatures that bob around the ocean. Jillian, are sharks as we think they are? Are they all out to get us? Are they as aggressive? What are they really like?
So unfortunately for sharks, they could use a better PR team. We see a lot of misinformation in the news and just, we're sort of taught from a pretty young age that these animals, we should be afraid. But the reality is they're fascinating creatures. They're not monsters. They're not man-eaters. And they're incredibly important for the health of the oceans around the world, which is important for all of us.
That's interesting. You say that they're important for the health of the ocean. Duncan, why is that? Without getting too much into the superpowers just yet, what are sharks doing in the ecosystem down there that's helping everything out?
Well, the thing is that sharks play a hugely important role in the ecosystem. They're kind of the stewards of the reef. And if we want to have healthy reefs and ecosystems, we really need sharks. And they do this by kind of weeding out all the sick and the injured and the dying fish and other tasty snacks that they like to eat. So it means that if we don't have all those sick and injured fish, or even fish that are suffering from different viruses or illnesses, the sharks pretty much take them out the food chain, and it stops those sick, injured and dying fish and other food stocks from populating and growing. So they keep these very, very, very healthy ecosystems for us.
That's a very kind way of saying just how deadly and how much they show no mercy that they're playing on the fish. They don't really need to be there anyway. Now, we know about all the big ones. We know about the big ones, Jillian. We know about the great white shark. What other sharks are out there that possibly we don't hear about, but maybe should, as you say, get a better PR team?
Yeah, so there are actually over 500 different species of shark, and we tend to see the same thing. Great whites, tiger sharks, different species of hammerheads that people are familiar with or can identify, but there's small sharks, and in the book as well, we tried to highlight a few of the species that people probably haven't heard of. They can glow, they can breach, they're super athletes, and just for kids and the general public to realize that how diverse the world of sharks actually is, from where they live, the food they eat, the size, their shape, their coloration patterns, right down to the shape and size of their teeth as well. It's an incredibly diverse population of animals.
Is there a clear reason why they are doing all of this different stuff? Why they have these superpowers, Duncan? Have they all evolved very specifically to fit a tiny gap in the spectrum of sharks that help stuff out?
Yeah, I think the sharks have been with us for a long time. Obviously, all they really kind of leave behind is their teeth, so we can kind of have a guess at what some of them may have even looked like. And we can see that some of these sharks, things have actually gone extinct in the past, and all we're left with is their teeth. So maybe an ecosystem that used to be there couldn't support them any longer, so they became extinct. So I think it's an interesting lesson that we can see how all these sharks have kind of evolved and changed over the years and over time to actually fit a special place in these different ecosystems. And if you look at a lot of different species, just even the way they look will tell you a lot about where they live.
Well, let's have a little investigation into how they look then. I'm just going to ask some random questions that come to mind when I think of sharks. First one, a hammerhead. Why do they have a massive head? Why have they evolved to look like that? What benefit can it possibly have?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a few reasons that the animal benefits from that particular shape, and kids ask us that question all the time, and it's a really good one. So if you think of that hammer shape and that it's a really large space or area, their head is called the cephalofoil, so it even has its own special name. And it positions their eyes really wide set. And if you look at a shark, a hammerhead, you might think, oh, they probably have terrible vision. Actually, the way they swim, and they're turning kind of this S shape with the position of those eyes, they can see full 360 around them. So that's the first thing. All right, excellent vision. So superpowered vision. Then all sharks have these special ampullae. Looks like if you look close at the face of a shark, it looks like the shark hasn't shaved in a few days, or there's kind of freckles. And this is the sharks referred to as its sixth sense sometimes. They have the same five senses we do, but they have some extra ones, and this is one of them. And all those little pores are filled with a gel. You can have hair gel or jelly, and it can detect the heartbeat of animals. So it's sort of a built-in metal detector, and they're scanning the bottom, but they're not looking for lost change or buried treasure. They're looking for lunch. And so that large cephalofoil, that big head space, allows them to have more of those, so it increases their ability to find their food. So that head shape actually helps these animals tremendously by boosting their superpowered senses.
So you mentioned earlier about a shark that can glow in the dark. Duncan, can you tell us a bit more about that? Why would a shark need to glow in the dark? What's it getting from this? Where can we find it?
Well, one of the sharks that actually has this amazing ability to glow in the dark is the Swell Shark. It's got a really cool couple of tricks under its sleeve, including this glow in the dark ability. Now, the reason it does this is it's almost like a secret handshake that occurs. So if it sees another one of its buddies around, it can actually glow, and they can kind of almost have like a secret high five or handshake with each other to communicate with each other. And some of the glows can only be seen by another swell shark. One of the other cool tricks that these guys have up their sleeve is that if they're caught, or say maybe a predator tries to get hold of them or something, they can actually swell up with lots of water, making themselves really big, like a bit of a balloon. And in theory, a predator might try and spit them out because they'd be a bit of an odd shape.
Also, what's this about sharks with superpowers to fart and it helps them sink? What's going on there, Jillian?
Yeah, so another question kids ask is they want to know, do animals fart? And with the sand tiger shark, they have the ability to gulp air. So sharks don't have a swim bladder like other fish do, which helps with their buoyancy. It means they don't just bob up to the surface and float around or sink to the bottom. And so by actually going up to the surface and ingesting some air, it's sort of like this particular species can have an internal balloon and they can hover in place. And if you see photos or videos of sand tigers, you may see many of them together and they're hovering. They're not swimming, they're just sitting there. And that air can actually do it. But when they're ready they need to expel that air. They need to get rid of it, right? They don't need it in their body for forever. They'll actually fart to get rid of it.
Yes to farting sharks. Amazing.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. The book is Shark Superpowers. It's beautiful. The pictures, the illustrations by Steve May are stunning. It's brilliantly informative. It's laid out in such an amazing way. If you love your sharks, or if you don't like your sharks, but you want to get to like your sharks, this is worthwhile. It's Shark Superpowers. Jillian and Duncan, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
For this week's Dangerous Dan, we are headed up to space to have a look at the hugely dangerous Eta Carini. It's a stellar system, which means a few stars orbit around each other. We're a solar system, which means we orbit around the sun. Stellar systems mean stars orbit around each other. It's around 7,800 light years away. And Eta Carini is generally thought to be one of the hottest stars that we know of. It's a blue hypergiant, and it's extremely bright. They think it's about 5 million times brighter than our sun. The stars themselves, they're about 100 times bigger than our sun. It's massive, and it's ready to blow up into a full-blown supernova at any moment. Now, inside the burning furnace of stars that are together there, temperatures soar to 72,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's just on the outside of them. But as the stars fly closer together, the gas in between them can sizzle up to almost 1.8 million degrees, which is furiously hot. Like, imagine a hot day on Earth. The hottest that you've ever been, really. It was probably at 90, maybe 100 degrees Fahrenheit. This cluster of stars gets to almost 2 million degrees. This hypergiant of stars is well worth a place on our Dangerous Dan list. It's time for a brand new episode of our Thunderbirds series, Thunderbirds Our Go Mission to Mars. We started this a few weeks ago. We had a little break last week because of the dinosaurs special, and the dinosaurs don't share their space with anyone. I mean, have you seen their teeth and their thrashing tail? You don't want to tell a dinosaur what to do. So we gave the Thunderbirds a little bit of a break last week. They are back. They're here to take us to Mars, the red planet. We'll be joined by KO and Brains, who are going to take us to Tracy Island, the home of the Thunderbirds, and then explain everything that needs to happen before we go to Mars.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thunderbirds Our Go. Mission to Mars.
Hey, Dan. So how are you enjoying your trip to Tracy Island?
Oh my gosh, I still can't quite actually believe I'm here. Thanks so much for helping me find out more about the ExoMars mission.
Well, International Rescue's the name and missions are our game. So what's up next, Brains?
I'd like to introduce you to a critical part of the Rosalind Franklin rover. And that's its drill, which is designed to penetrate the different types of soils expected on Mars, which could be soft and dusty or rock hard. It's not just any drill. Take a closer look. As you can see, the drill is made up of a number of components. There's a drill tool, which is nearly 1 meter long. As well as the sharp, pointy bit, the tool has a special acquisition device to collect samples, sensors to record its position and temperature, and a lamp to show what it's doing. Then there are 3 extension rods, each 1/2 meter long, which extend the drilling depth to 2 meters. And there are also clamps, electronics, and a backup drill tool, all of which can be tucked within the rover and moved into position when needed.
Now, I'm no expert, but I kind of remember you guys using something a bit similar on some of your missions.
That's correct. We have a tunneling vehicle called the Mole, and sometimes we use other drill pods. On one mission, we used a heated drill to rescue Brandon Berenger, the famous vlogger, after he became trapped under a snowy avalanche.
Poor guy didn't know which way was up. He has Alan Tracy to thank for that. That mission was super tough because movements and vibrations in snowy places can cause more avalanches, so we had to be so careful with the drill. Although snowy avalanches aren't something that's expected to be a problem on Mars.
Maybe not, but precision is key. There are risks for the rover, one of which is that it may become stuck. That's why it's got this special feature. It's a special jettison device that's designed to help free the drill if it gets stuck and prevents the rover from moving, which would be bad for the mission.
So it's going to drill down and try not to get stuck. Got it. But what next? I mean, I'm guessing it isn't just making holes.
Far from it. Penetrating the soil, breaking through the surface, is just the first step. Using an infrared spectrometer, it will characterize the minerals in the borehole. And then if the scientists on Earth want to know more, the drill will collect samples of what's below the surface and transfer them to the rover's onboard laboratory, where mineral and chemical tests can be carried out. Scientists will pay particular attention for any signs of organic substances.
I bet the scientists will be eagerly awaiting for those first results to come in.
During the ExoMars mission, the rover is expected to travel several kilometers and collect at least 17 samples.
Only 17? Doesn't sound a lot for the distance it has to travel.
That's just the minimum. It could be many more.
It's tremendously exciting to think of what might be found. And the drill has one more trick up its sleeve. It also has technology which can scan the drilled area to give us even more information around the area that's been bored.
Bored? Doesn't sound boring to me at all. Do you get it?
Unfortunately, yes. That sounds like the kind of gag I'd expect from Gordon.
Thunderbirds are go, mission to Mars, with support from the UK Space Agency and International Rescue. Find out more at funkidslive.com/space.
It's the Fun Kids Science Weekly. Now, there is a brand new book out that hugs the line of sci-fi and real science, and we love our sci-fi and we love our real science, so I thought it was perfect for the show. It's called Martian Blood. It's by John Pahl. He's on the show. Hey, John.
Hiya, how you doing, Dan?
Really, really well. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, when you're writing a book about living on Mars, what research do you have to do to make sure the parts of the story where humans are on Mars is actually real?
I think when you're writing, you have a decision to make about how realistic you want it to be, because some writers go for, fantasy and the far future and, magic buttons that you space drive and all that sort of stuff. I try to make mine as much as possible scientifically plausible. And so I did do quite a bit of research to try and make sure that it was a base that could happen in the lifetime of some of the people listening to this broadcast.
Where did you start with that research, though, John? So, humans are not on Mars at the moment. There might be dreams to live on Mars in many decades' time. How do you make it scientifically, as you say, plausible if we've not actually done it yet?
Well, a lot of very bright people are working on that subject as we speak. I was involved in a project from the British Interplanetary Society about 15 years ago, looking at what would be involved in setting up a base on the polar regions of Mars. And so there was a whole range of experts on the project. I was doing communications and navigations. And the final report was full of lots of details about, what the base looked like, what are the key functions that we need to have, like, the farms and all the rest of it. And also, there are some modern day on Earth applications that could be applicable to Mars. So take food. The soil on Mars is full of salts. It's not very good for growing crops, even though you might see that in the film The Martian. And so they're more likely to use things called hydroponics, which is where you have plants growing in water. And you start to see that actually now on Earth. And I visited a hydroponic farm underground in London itself, and that was part of the research process.
You said that you had been involved with kind of figuring out what we would need to do if we did ever live in the polar regions of Mars. What would be the most important, aside from oxygen, what would be the most important aspect we'd need to deal with right away? You mentioned farms earlier on. If humans were ever going to go and live on Mars, would we have to figure out the most vital people to go and move there first to make it livable for everyone else?
I think that's definitely right, and there are some key skills that the first people on Mars will need to have, and one of them is providing the food, because it's such a long way to go. You can't have deliveries every day. There's not going to be an Amazon truck arriving with the fresh food. So they're going to have to be completely self-sufficient. So they're going to grow their own food, make sure they can use the resources locally wherever possible. I mean, even things like toiletries. At some point, they're going to have to make them locally rather than have them all shipped from Earth.
I've always wondered about fuel, John. But can you kind of talk to us a bit about that? It would take us ages to get to Mars. I think I read something almost a year, or that might be my brain playing tricks on me. How would we have enough fuel on one rocket to get there? What would go on? Is there dreams of kind of turning the moon into a space service station?
I think that's absolutely right, in that you have to go very fast to get anywhere in space. So, I mean, I can bike in London and my bike at 6 or 7 meters per second. But to get into orbit, to get to the space station, you've got to go 1,000 times faster than that, about 7 kilometers every second. And then to get into Mars, you have to get much, much faster still. And so they are looking at ways of refueling in space, let's say getting water from the moon and using that as propellant. But even with that, it could take, with a chemical propellant, 6 months or 9 months to get to Mars. And so some people are looking at more advanced rockets, things like nuclear-powered rockets, because they could do the journey much quicker, let's say in 3 months.
And you said it would stick to the polar regions. Why is that initially?
Well, the project was looking at the polar regions. I actually decided to put Tom a bit nearer the equator because the main reason for going there is probably going to be looking for life. And the main places to look for life is where there's been water. And near the equator, you've got lots of riverbeds that are mostly dried up. You've got seas, again, dried up. But they would be good places to send a base, so you can start sending the scientists that can look at the rocks and see if they can find fossils or any other signs of life.
Now, on the show, John, we've had a fairly checkered history with people saying that they're going to go to Mars. One of the very first interviews that I did a couple of years ago now, I spoke to someone who had bought a one-way ticket to Mars. And his the flight kept getting delayed. What do you think, John? What are the chances that humans will get to Mars within my lifetime?
I think it's pretty good. I mean, I set my book with the Mars base end of the 2040s, early 2050s, that sort of time frame. So I don't think it's going to be the 2020s. There's just too much work to do. But 2030s and 2040s, I'm pretty confident that NASA or people like Elon Musk will put together a project to go to Mars. And it's not just NASA and Europeans, it's also looking at the Chinese and Indians. They're both very keen to not just go into space, but to go to the moon and Mars and further afield. So I'm pretty confident that anyone listening to this podcast will at some point see a human, landing on Mars.
What are the main roadblocks at the moment? What do we need to do in order to get a rocket to Mars, say, by the year 2050?
I think one of the most important things is making it cheaper to get material into orbit, because it is just so expensive to launch stuff into space, and you need a lot of stuff to get to Mars. So I think reducing the cost of getting space is a big thing, but also learning how to live off the land. So when we go to Mars, we're going to be self-sufficient and not rely on launches all the time like the space station does. And I think there's a whole set of skills relating to making your space station completely self-sufficient, circular economy and a closed environment and all those sorts of technologies.
Amazing. Well, it's the first in the Noctilucence series, Volume 1, Martian Blood. John, thanks so much for coming on the show.
You're very welcome, Dan. It's been a pleasure.
This is the Fun Kids Science Weekly, and the time is I don't know, it's a podcast. You could be listening to this at any time. Just look at your watch. Don't rely on me. Come on. Anyway, it is time for Science in the News. There are fears that a new predator could threaten Britain's bee colonies. The large Asian hornet is a carnivore, so it eats bees. It's spread across France and the Channel Islands, and there is fear that the UK could be swarmed next. Last Saturday, millions of people across the world watched Spacex launch its first ever crewed mission, sending 2 NASA astronauts to the International Space Station. Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley took off, and they were the first astronauts to leave American soil since 2011. It was cancelled a few days before because of bad weather, but then they managed it. And finally, the discovery of a new breeding pair raises hopes that the world's rarest primate, the Hainan gibbon, may have a future. It lives only in a tiny patch of forest in China. There are about 30, and villagers nearby have spotted a male and a female swinging through the trees together, so hopes are high for the species to get a few more gibbons soon. And that is it for this week's Fun Kids Science Weekly. Remember, if you've got a sciencey question that you need answering, you can't sleep at night, just racking around your brain, well, let me do it for you. I can sort it out. Just leave it as a review for us over on Apple Podcasts. There's a little comment box at the bottom. That's where you write your question. Leave your name so I can say hello. Give us 5 stars as well. That'll help me see it. If you're not on Apple Podcasts, then just head to funkidslive.com and send a message to my page over there. There are so many ways that you can hear all of our amazing Fun Kids series. You've heard some today. We've got loads more. You can get them wherever you get your shows from. They're on the free Fun Kids app and at funkidslive.com. And Fun Kids are a children's radio station that you can hear all over the country on your DAB digital radio on that free Fun Kids app. And as always, at funkidslive.com.